Hi guys, and welcome back to another episode of Lipstick and Lore. Today we're going to dive into the unsolved, conspiratorial, historical, spooky, and interesting stories that plague my mind more than I'd like to admit. Sorry for not posting a video on Saturday. It was a holiday weekend, so sorry about that. But I am going to post one now, and there should be one posted next Saturday. So if all goes well, you'll get 2 videos in 1 week. 2 for the price of 1. You're welcome. And today's video is going to be a little bit differently formatted than my other 2 videos, so let me guys know if you can follow it and if it makes sense to you guys, because I'm open to criticism. And hopefully you enjoy this one. I mean, I enjoyed making it, so I hope all of you enjoy too. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe. On to the video. Disclaimer. Viewer discretion is advised. Some of the topics and things we cover in these videos are not suitable for some viewers. I do not recommend my videos for children, especially children under the ages of 13. And some of the things we cover can be upsetting to some people. There's strong language, descriptions of crimes, people unfortunately dying, and disappearances. So if those are things that are going to upset you in any way, please go ahead and click out now, because my objective with this channel is not to upset but to educate. So please do continue with caution. Don't say I didn't warn you. And once again, handing it over to VoiceOver Me. Before we get started, I just want to say I'm sorry if there's a lot of background noise. They are leaf blowing outside my window, and there's nothing I can do about that. And I don't know why, but every time I sit down to film a voiceover, for some reason, there decides to be lots of noise. I don't know what to tell you guys. It could be silent all day, but the moment I sit down to film this, there is somebody mowing their lawn, or a dog, or something or other that hinders me. But if I want to get this out today, I have to film this now, so sorry about it, but that's just gonna have to be how it is. But anyway, getting into today's case. Today's case is that of Fort Hood, which is kind of an interesting case because it's not one disappearance or one murder or one crime. It's a place where a lot of crimes have happened and a lot of disappearances have happened, and it's got some mysterious circumstances going on. So I'm going to try to cover as many as I can in today's video, so hopefully you guys can follow along. I try to make it as easy as possible. So without further ado, let's get into this case. So what is Fort Hood? Fort Hood is a military base with a bloody and mysterious background. It has everything from mass shootings to unsolved deaths. Fort Hood recently changed its name to Fort Cavos after General Richard Edward Cavos, the first Hispanic 4-star general in the U.S. Army. It was done in a large movement to remove Confederate names from military installations. In recent news, though, Fort Hood is talked about to be reverting back to its original name. For this case, I am going to be calling it Fort Hood, just because that is what it was referred to when most of these things happened. So, not to confuse anybody, if you look it up, it will say Fort Cavos, but I'm going to be referring to it as Fort Hood. So, Fort Hood is located in Killeen, Texas, often known as a sort of mysterious and deadly town, and a lot of people call it Kill, Texas instead of Killeen, Texas, just because of its reputation and the things that happen there. This base covers approximately 340 square miles, and it was originally formed in 1942, and it was originally called Camp Hood, and it was used for testing and training with tank destroyers during World War II. This base has been associated with many scandals throughout its time, including mass shootings, sexual harassment cases, numerous deaths, unsolved crimes, and even possible cover-ups. So some of the scandals I will be covering today, obviously I will not be covering all of them because there is quite a few, but some of them do include the sexual harassment cases. I will be covering 2 of the mass shootings that happened. I will be talking about the possible cover-ups, and I will be going into the mysterious unsolved deaths and disappearances. The first incident I'm going to be talking about today happened on November 5th, 2009, and it was a mass shooting that took place at Fort Hood. It was done by an Army major and psychiatrist. His name was Nidal Hansen, and he fatally shot 13 people and injured another 30 more. And this was considered one of the most deadliest shootings to ever happen on a U.S. military base. And I think it is still considered that to this day. I mean, 13 people is a lot, especially in a place where most would consider safe. I mean, a military base, if something goes wrong, is the place you want to be because it's fortified, everyone's background checked. Like, it's something most people would consider safe. And it definitely was shocking to most people, especially the town of Killeen, because you don't think a mass shooting is going to happen on a military base. And the man who perpetrated it was one of their own, which was even more scary to a lot of the people, not only in Killeen, but on Fort Hood's base itself. According to pretrial testimony, Hans entered the Guns Gallery store in Killeen on July 31st, 2009, and he purchased the FN-57 semi-automatic pistol that he would use in the attack on Fort Hood. According to Army Specialist William Gilbert, a regular customer at the store, Hansen entered the store and asked for the most technologically advanced weapon on the market and the one with the highest standard magazine capacity. Hans was allegedly asked how he intended to use the weapon, but he simply repeated that he wanted the most advanced handgun with the largest magazine capacity, which, why this wasn't flagged, I don't know. I mean, if someone walks into a store and asks you for, it's basically walking into a store and asking for what weapon is going to be the best for a murder. I mean, that's the equivalent of it. So I don't know why this wasn't flagged and why he was even sold the pistol at all. I mean, why would you sell somebody that? Especially somebody who is asking for it specifically. I mean, and won't give you a reason why they want it. It seems very, very weird. There was said to be 4 people present during this situation, and that was Gilbert, Hansen, an employee, and the manager, and every single one of the people there recommended the FN-57 pistol, and Gilbert had actually owned one of these pistols, and he spent an hour describing its operations to Hansen. Hansen actually left the store that day without a gun, saying that he needed to research the weapon. He later returned the next day and purchased it, and then after that he visited the store once a week to buy extra magazines along with over 3,000 rounds of ammunition in total. In the weeks prior to the attack, Hansen visited an outdoor shooting range in Florence, Texas, where he allegedly became superb at hitting silhouette targets at a distance up to 100 yards, which I didn't realize how impressive this was until I did some research into it. That's pretty freaking impressive. I mean, it's scary impressive, actually, because that's a terrifying thought, but as somebody who is in the Army, I mean, it makes sense. But it's still, all of that should have been a red flag to everybody involved, that a guy comes in asking for a very dangerous weapon, buys 3,000 rounds of ammunition. What do you need 3,000 rounds of ammunition for, realistically? Unless you are going to war, what do you need that for? There's no good reason for you to have that much ammunition as a, personal weapon. That's not his military weapon, that is a personal weapon. So having that much ammunition is honestly scary. And why nobody stopped him or flagged it, it's very weird. At approximately 1:34 p.m. local time, November 5th, 2009, Hansen entered the Soldier Readiness Processing Center, which is basically a medical center for soldiers getting ready to be deployed or coming back from deployment. And Hansen had been in here many, many times, and he was actually in there today because he was getting ready to be deployed to Afghanistan. And this time, though, it was a little bit different because he was armed with the pistol that he had bought, and he had also decked it out with laser sights, which are, if you have ever watched a cop show or anything like that, or the red dots, basically, but he had one green one and one red one, and it's nobody flagged this. Nobody thought, maybe let's check on this guy. Nobody thought, why is he doing this? I mean, I get it. Military personnel are going to have guns, but 3,000 rounds of ammunition and then this, I mean, that's a little interesting. He had entered the building and he went to the front desk to the right of the north doors and asked to see Major Parrish, who worked in the building and had been assisting Hansen in his deployment preparations. The worker at the desk went down the hall to get Parrish. According to eyewitnesses, Hansen went around behind the desk, bowed his head for several minutes before he suddenly stood up and opened fired. Witnesses said Hansen initially sprayed bullets at soldier in a Frank-line motion before taking aim at individual soldiers, which is terrifying. I mean, he didn't care who he hurt. He sprayed bullets literally everywhere. And unfortunately, this did result in 13 deaths and 30 injuries, which is an awful count for a mass shooting, especially on a military base. Even given the deadly nature of this, Hansen never shot civilians. He had multiple opportunities to, but never shot them, and instead targeted those in uniforms. So this really shows that it was an attack on the military base itself, and not just an attack on Killian. And this doesn't make what he did any better, but it's just sort of an interesting piece of information to think about, that he wasn't just mindlessly killing random people who walked by, he was targeting those in uniform. I'm going to take this moment to list the 13 who lost their lives in this awful shooting. I'm so sorry if I mispronounce these names. I'm not that great with pronunciations, but I'm going to do my best. So the first one is Michael Grant Cahill, a civilian psychiatrist assistant. Librado Eduardo Carvoa, he was a major. Justin Michael DeCrow was a staff sergeant. John Paul Gaffney was a captain. Frederick Greene was a specialist. Jason Dean Hunt was another specialist. Amy Sue Kruger was a staff sergeant. Aaron Thomas Nemeka was a private first class. Michael Scott Pearson was another private first class. Russell Gilbert Seeger was a captain. Francesca Velez was a private first class. Juanita Lee Warman was a lieutenant and colonel. And Kamzi Zong was a private first class. All of these 13 people died that day due to not only lack of red flags and really picking out that what this man was doing in the days prior was not only something to look out for, but something to consider scary. And they also lost their lives due to lack of mental health help in the Army. I mean, this was a military base, and unfortunately this man, he had a break, and he took it out on everybody else. And that's why I think it is so important to get true mental health for those in military bases or who are coming back from deployment and veterans. I think their mental health is so important because these people fight for our country and then come back with wounds that aren't always visible, and I think they need to be treated as regular wounds. I mean, you get shot, you get treated. I think their mental issues should be treated that way as well. Obviously, this isn't me excusing his actions. This is me giving a reason to his actions and expressing that we need true reform in our system. The next tragic event I'm going to briefly touch on is the murder of Vanessa Guillen, a 20-year-old United States Army soldier that had so much life to live and so much to give to this world, and I'm not going to cover her case in great detail. There's so many videos out there that cover it in great detail, and this is not to make it seem less important. I just want to cover as many incidences and give as many cases light in this video as I possibly can. So I'm going to briefly touch on her and just to show you the terrible things that happen at Fort Hood, because her case really sparked a lot of outrage in the public, and it led to some actual reform at Fort Hood, which I think is so sad that someone had to lose their life for that to happen, but I think it's something good coming out of something so tragic. So, the murder of Vanessa Guillen took place in April 22nd, 2020, when she was bludgeoned to death by another soldier. Aaron David Robinson is been marked as the perpetrator, and Guillen had been missing for more than 2 months before some of her dismembered and burned remains were found buried along the Leon River on June 30th. Robinson fled Fort Hood after learning of the discovery. When law enforcement tried to apprehend him near Killian, Texas, he had fatally shot himself, which is disappointing and frankly a cowardly way out when you know you've done something terrible but you don't want to face the consequences for it. I am not saying that self-inflicted deaths are cowardly. I'm saying that him doing that was cowardly because he didn't want to face justice for what he did. Vanessa was a 20-year-old United States Army soldier, and she was on base somewhere where she thought she was safe, and her life was taken from her by another soldier. That is not only sickening, but also very upsetting, and shows that even in the places we think we're safest, we're not always safe. A local woman identified as Robinson's girlfriend was taken into custody for assisting him in dismembering and burying Guillen's body on July 2nd, 2020. She was charged with one federal count of conspiracy to tamper with evidence, and on July 13th, 2021, she was indicted on 11 counts by a federal grand jury. On November 29th, 2022, she pleaded guilty to accessory to murder after the fact and 3 counts of making a false statement. On August 14th, 2023, she was sentenced to the maximum of 13 years for her role in covering up the murder of Guillen. And it's so sad because Vanessa had a long-time goal of serving in the Army, but after being assigned to Fort Hood, she told friends and family that she had been sexually harassed by a superior. She did not report it officially in fear of retaliation, and such reports were supposed to go through the chain of command, so if it was a superior, it would have to go through them. And in military forces, you are trained not to break chain of command, which is helpful in some situations and not helpful in others. I mean, if Vanessa maybe would have reported this, I mean, who knows what could have happened. I mean, maybe it would have made it worse, maybe it would have made it better, but either way, this poor girl lost her life and dealt with something that nobody should have to deal with, especially in a military base. I mean, she wanted to go and serve her country, and instead she was sexually harassed and assaulted and was later bludgeoned to death. I mean, that's something that is not only terrifying to think about, but also so disheartening to those who want to join the military forces later. I mean, it's discouraging to think that in a place you're supposed to be safe, that Vanessa just wasn't. And it really makes young women think about their decision to want to join any of the branches of military in the U.S. I mean, you want to serve your country, but you're so afraid of something like this happening that you just don't. And I think that's really sad. And Vanessa's case brought a lot of light, and it later led to 14 superiors being fired for misconduct and corruption, which I think is so sad that someone had to lose their life for that to happen. But I do believe some good came out of it, and her family are huge advocates for reform and are advocates for sexual assault victims, and I commend them for all the work they did because they really spoke out. They weren't going to stay quiet about Vanessa's death, and I think why it won't bring her back, it might save the next person who goes through something like this, because while breaking chain of command can be scary, it could save your life. I mean, if Vanessa had broken chain of command, maybe she'd still be with us. And I think that is something that needs to be looked at. And I think there needs to be serious reform in military spaces when things like this happen. There needs to be a procedure or some sort of leeway for it. The next tragic incident that I'm going to talk about is the disappearance and later death of Gregory Morales. He was another soldier at Fort Hood, and his skeletal remains were discovered in June of 2020 in Killeen, Texas, in a field near the 3,200 block of Florence Road, after Army CID special agents received a tip as to his location of the body. They do suspect that foul play is involved, but nothing has been charged or really confirmed. He was a private, and he was last seen driving his personally owned vehicle outside of Fort Hood in Killeen, Texas, on the night of August 19th, 2019. The last known verbal contact with Morales was August 20, 2019. Morales, also known as Gregory Weldel, was out processing for Army and was scheduled to be discharged within a couple of days when he disappeared. Weddle was his last name before taking his wife's name in marriage, so some reports will say Weddle, some reports will say Morales, and Army CID strongly encouraged anyone with information to please come forward because this case is still open to this day, and it is still considered unsolved and tragic, so if anybody does have information, I'm going to go ahead and link the number for the CID Special Agents Unit that is covering this case down below, and I'll also try to put it up on the screen for those who might have any information or might have any sort of anything that can help. And yeah, I mean, my videos are to educate, and if I can do anything to help, I would love for this family to get closure. I would love for all of these families to get closure in all the cases that I talk about, because this man had so much life ahead of him. I mean, he had so much to do and so much to give, and he had a wife, and that is so sad that he didn't get to live out the rest of his life. The next Fort Hood tragedy that I'm going to talk about is that of Brandon Scott Rosecrans. A 27-year-old Fort Hood soldier was found dead in Harker Heights, Texas on May 18, 2020. His death was ruled a murder, and Brandon Michael Alvarez was later arrested and charged with the crime. Rosecrans was a private first class assigned to the 3rd Armored Brigade Combat Team, 1st Cavalry Division, as a quartermaster and chemical equipment repairer. Rosecrans' body was found on the side of a road in Bell County, and his vehicle was later found burning in another area. The Harker Heights Police Department initially investigated the death as a possible murder. Brandon Michael Alvarez was allegedly with Rosecrans before his death and was arrested and charged with his murder. Investigators believe that Alvarez shot Rosecrans while traveling together and then left him by the side of the road. It was one of several of the deaths that happened between soldiers from Fort Hood. There's something wrong there. I mean, because in 2020 alone, there was over 30 deaths in Fort Hood or around Fort Hood between Fort Hood soldiers. I mean, that's an astounding number for just a year, especially in an area that is, it's not a whole state, it's not 30 murders in a whole state, it's 30 murders in some acres of land. And I think it just proves that there's something wrong there, something isn't right about Fort Hood. The next case I'm going to talk about regarding Fort Hood is the one that I heard about first, and that really sparked my interest into Fort Hood as a whole. It is that of Christopher Martin Ferguson. He was a corporal at Fort Hood, and he was a combat infantryman stationed there. He was deployed to Iraq in 2005 and participated in numerous combat patrols and joint operations. He unfortunately died on March 25, 2007 in Killeen, Texas, after an incident where he allegedly fell from a balcony at a party. And I say allegedly because it is speculated later on exactly what happened to him, but most accounts will say that he fell off that balcony. His cause of death has been disputed many times. It was originally ruled as an accident, but it ultimately was ruled undetermined. There's been a lot of controversy because his injuries didn't match falling off a balcony. When you fall off a balcony, oftentimes you're going to try to catch yourself, especially if you're partying or slightly tipsy or something like that. It's your body's natural reaction to try to stop itself from falling. And he only suffered blunt force trauma to the head. He only had severe brain damage, and I don't mean only as in like it's something small. I mean only as in that's all he suffered. No broken bones, no scratches, no lacerations, no nothing that you would typically get from a fall, especially a fall from that height, because the balcony was quite high up. So there's been some controversies, conflicting accounts, and questions surrounding his death. His sister and others have voiced concerns about inconsistencies in the information provided by investigators and eyewitnesses. They believe that there's more to the story. Some sources, including news reports, have mentioned a claim of suicide, while the Criminal Investigation Division, or also known as CID, reportedly claimed it was an accident. His case has been featured in media, including the show Still a Mystery, and on podcasts, which highlight the continued search for answers about his death. His sister has done many interviews and speaks out avidly about looking at these things and trying to figure out the real answers behind why these people die or go missing surrounding military bases. She believes that there needs to be serious investigation, and she is not afraid to speak out about it, and I really commend her for it, because there's a lot of people and soldiers' families that are too afraid to speak up about it, and I think it is something that needs to be spoken about in order to get the reform and change that we want in this system. The next incident that I'm going to talk about regarding Fort Hood is that of Dakota Lee Stump. He was a 19-year-old private first class in the U.S. Army who was based at Fort Hood, Texas. He was an indirect fire infantry assigned to the 4th Squadron, 9th Cavalry Regiment, 2nd Brigade Combat Team, 1st Cavalry Division. Man, that is a mouthful, by the way. He disappeared on October 10th, 2016, during a field exercise. He had gone with 2 other soldiers on a post store to withdraw money and buy vodka, which they had brought back to their barracks. He had until 9:50 p.m. to return to his troop's motor parole. When he didn't return, he was initially reported missing. Tragically, his body was found almost a month later on November 3rd, 2016. He was found in a wooded area on Fort Hood next to his flipped-over car. Investigations indicated that he missed a turn while speeding, resulting in a fatal car accident. There has also been some controversy and outcry due to this situation because a lot of people don't believe it's as simple as it seems and that the ruling may be inaccurate. Obviously, that is alleged because it was ruled an accidental car crash, but most people and the media don't believe this to be true. The Army initially declared him absent without leave, which is considered AWOL for those who understand the terminology. Shortly after his disappearance, they marked him as AWOL, considering that he had run away or left because he wanted to, not because he was necessarily missing. This caused distress for his family, who believed he wouldn't intentionally abandon his post because he was so excited to partake in the military. He wanted to serve, so him going AWOL seemed to be something that was very confusing to his loved ones. His mother, Patrice Franklin, criticized the Army's investigations, stating that they were slow to act and assumed he had left base on his own. Because for the first 24 hours, and I believe even the first 48 hours, they did not look for him whatsoever. And even the searches after that were very slow and they didn't have enough pep in their step and weren't really looking that hard for him because they truly believed that he had just wandered off on his own and that he just did not want to be a part of the Army anymore. A faulty phone ping incorrectly suggested that he was in Indiana, which further delayed the search in the correct area. So they had pinged his phone, or allegedly pinged his phone, and it said that he was in Indiana, so they truly believed that he had run away from his post and just decided that he didn't want to serve anymore, which hindered the investigation so much more than it had already been hindered, which really upset his family. After his death, his family advocated for Warrior Alert law to improve how the military handles missing soldier cases, which basically means that Warrior Alert is sort of like an Amber Alert, but for missing soldiers. Like, it just creates more oomph in investigations for missing soldiers. It really adds to it and makes it so that they are looked for and not just considered AWOL right off the bat. This whole thing is just kind of upsetting because he wasn't searched for and they didn't look for him and he was dead somewhere for a whole month where his family didn't know, and he was found very close to base, and that's like, he should have been found much quicker than that, and his family should have had closure much quicker than that. And some people believe that it wasn't an accident at all and believe that it was possibly a homicide because he was found outside of the car instead of in the car, but obviously we can't prove this, and his death was ruled an accidental car crash. Some reasons why most people don't believe this is true is because it was found that he was going 60 miles an hour to have ended up where he was, and his toxicology screening after his death came back negative, which means he was not intoxicated. And not only this, but there is a bone in your body that it's in your neck region, and it often shows that you've been strangled because it's very hard to go missing if you have not been strangled or if there hasn't been force put there in some sort of strangling motion. And this bone was actually missing from Dakota's body, and this is the bone that autopsies often show if people have been strangled or not. So this bone to be missing without trace is kind of interesting and sort of leads people to believe that maybe something else had happened here and it wasn't an accidental car crash. The next unfortunate death we're going to talk about takes place just a couple of months after Dakota's unfortunate death, and that is the death of Private Paige Elizabeth Briles. And this one also has an element of sexual harassment because during boot camp, Paige did allege to her family that she was sexually harassed by somebody during boot camp. She never reported it or made an official report to anybody, but her family argues that she did say this to them and that she was very nervous about going into active service after this incident. But it was never formally reported, so this is all alleged quotes from the family. And with Paige no longer being with us, we cannot confirm or deny it. Although I do believe in believing victims, so if her family says that she had been sexually harassed, I am inclined to believe it, and I think it does add something to her unfortunate death. So, Paige Elizabeth Briles was a 21-year-old soldier assigned to the Warrior Transit Unit at Carl R. Darnell Army Medical Center, Fort Hood, and she was found unresponsive at an on-post residency on December 24th, 2016. Her death was under investigation by the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Command. Briles entered active duty military service in February 2015 as a wheeled vehicle mechanic and was awarded National Defense Service Medal. She was also awarded the Army Service Ribbon, and these are two amazing awards, especially for somebody so young, and it's really unfortunate that her time was cut so short because she was super excited to serve in the U.S. military, and she was one of the most excited people I think I've ever seen. I mean, reading about her and her story, she seemed genuinely passionate about serving her country. And her death was talked about to be a suicide and at one point was ruled a suicide, even though her family reportedly requested a homicide investigation. It wasn't looked at as a homicide, it was considered a suicide. And unfortunately, that's sort of where it stays, although I believe it is still an open investigation. But her family is advocates for reform in the military system as well as advocates for SA victims because they do strongly believe that Paige was sexually harassed during her time at boot camp, and they believe that is something that needs to be less normalized in military settings. The next incident that I'm going to talk about is one that it has struck me so hard in my soul. I'm going to go ahead and link the video down below, but there's a video on the channel The Paranormal Files that I watched that he actually interviewed the cousin of this man, and it's an amazing video. It's super well put together. I think all of you should go check it out, and it's what really jump-started my research into this case, and her interview is very great. She's very well-spoken, and she's an amazing advocate, and I think you guys should go watch that, so I will link it down below, and make sure to go check that out. The person involved in this is that of Marcus Nelson, or Marcus Lamar Nelson, and he was a 45-year-old soldier stationed at Fort Hood. He was assigned to the 1st Battalion in the 227th Aviation Regiment, 1st Air Cavalry Brigade, and he served in the Army since April 2005. He was a veteran of 2 deployments to Iraq, which is absolutely, thank you so much for his service and all that he did, because anyone who fights for their country, I believe, is absolutely just thank you so much and deserves all the praise in the world, because a lot of us aren't brave enough to do that. Unfortunately, though, this is not a case that ends happily, and he unfortunately died while in pretrial confinement at the Bell County Jail, and he was facing multiple charges under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, including departing a place of duty and disobeying orders. And the circumstances regarding this are very strange. Once again, her interview goes through it much better than I ever could, but I'm going to give you guys the overview of it here because it's something that really pushed the narrative of Fort Hood being corrupt in some way. So the circumstances surrounding his death were under investigation by Bell County deputies and the Texas Attorney General Office, which is a little interesting considering it was a military dispute and you think it would be settled in military court. And most of the people there said that he had some sort of mental break and actually was put in hospital, but not kept there and later sent to county jail, which if he did have a mental break, you think he'd be kept in hospital. And if you think it was a military dispute, wouldn't it be settled in military confinement, not a county jail? Also, dying in county jail isn't something that just happens within 24 hours of being held there. I mean, it's not normal and it's not typical. I mean, obviously that doesn't mean it can't happen, but it's unlikely at best. It's something that just isn't typical. You don't get sent to jail and die 24 hours of being in there. I mean, it's just not something that happens. There's a petition circulating online that raises concerns about the lack of public clarification regarding the circumstances of Sergeant Nelson's death, and it calls for transparency and accountability. It also mentions that they had posted social media about corruption and leadership in military prior to his disappearance and death. So Nelson did go very public with his concerns about corruption in his military base. He did a couple of social media posts that I will try to find screenshots of and put them up on the screen, because all of them talked about how something was going on and were you going to stand around and take it, or were you going to stand up and stand for something, basically. He was very much for fighting against corruption and speaking out against those who were doing wrong. So it is alleged that maybe Nelson had witnessed something or had heard about something that was happening at Fort Hood and was getting ready to out it, and some believe that may have led to his unfortunate death. While that is all alleged information and none of it can be confirmed, it is a likely and very popular line of thinking on this case. And it's just a case that is so confusing, because if he had, done something wrong or left his post or got into a dispute with a higher up, how it was handled didn't make sense. On top of this, most of the information about his death was not released to the family after his death, and to this day, they don't really know the circumstances in which he died. All they know is that he was quickly transported to the funeral, which happened very quickly, and it's very sad for not only his families, but also the fact that he never got to speak out about whatever corruption he had been posting about, and that we may never get that information. And it almost seems like, at least to me, that he was silenced in some way, and it's heartbreaking for everybody involved, his friends, his family. They all said he was a lovable, listening guy. I mean, he was the person you'd go to with problems, and he would give you a solution, or he would make you feel better. He was just that kind of guy, and the fact that we lost somebody who was so active in the military and so helpful in serving his country is disheartening. And once again, I will link that video down below, because her interview it really hits you in your chest, and I think more people should see it. And I will also try to find the petition and link that down below as well, because I believe in reform and I believe in doing something good with these videos. So I'll either leave it in the description or I will put it in a pinned comment, and I really hope that some good can come of it and that you at least look at it, if not sign it. The last incident of Fort Hood that I'm going to be talking about today is that of the 2014 shooting, and obviously this isn't the last or one of the last situations that happen at Fort Hood. I mean, it is still open to this day, and there is still happenings happening at Fort Hood, and there is so many victims, and I encourage all of you to go and do your own research, because there is so many innocent people who died in this place, and they keep happening, and it is not only not being investigated properly, but it is also just sort of being swept under the rug, and I believe that it's something that needs to be looked at, and it's something that needs to be dealt with, because it's not okay, and it makes honest, true people not want to join the military, and I think that is the last thing we need in today's day and age. So this shooting happened April 2nd, 2014, around 4 to 4:08 p.m., and the perpetrator was Army Specialist Ivan Lopez, age 34. He was a member of Fort Hood, and he unfortunately killed 4 people, including himself. 14 additional people were injured, 12 by gunshot wounds. The victims that unfortunately lost their lives in this awful shooting were Sergeant First Class Daniel M. Ferguson, Sergeant Carlos A. Lancy Rodriguez, and Timothy W. Owens, who was a sergeant. And I want to take a moment to acknowledge that these are real people who lost their lives that day and did not deserve to lose their lives that day. The weapon that was used in the shooting was a .45 caliber Smith and a Wesson MP semi-automatic pistol. Lopez was not authorized to carry a concealed firearm, so how he got this is questionable, but we do believe that he bought it, even though he was not authorized to carry it. Lopez opened fire at several locations on base, including an administration office, a motor pool building, and a medical building. He was confronted by a military police officer and died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The Army's investigation concluded that there was no single event or stressor that caused the shooting. While Lopez had recently experienced the death of a family member and was facing financial difficulties, investigators found no indication in his records that he was likely to commit violence. So some believe that he had a psychotic break, while some believe he knew something more and just took it out on whomever he saw that day. And it's interesting to think about because Lopez had 15 years of service, including deployments to Syria and Iraq. He was being treated for depression and anxiety and was being evaluated for possible post-traumatic stress disorder, but he was never formally diagnosed with this, so some believe that maybe that's what triggered him to do this, that he was having some sort of post-traumatic stress disorder attack, or something in his mental just snapped. After a thorough investigation that was done by interviewing witnesses, reviewing records, and overall addressing the scene, investigators concluded that there were no clear warning signs that could have predicted the shooting. And this was a shooting that made wide media spread. So wide, in fact, that even Obama talked about it at the time during a press conference, and I will try to include some of the clips of that in here, but yes, it was considered very tragic, and it was another mark on Fort Hood's long, bloody history. And it's tragic that 2 awful mass shootings happened at this place, and it's tragic, and you wonder why they happened or how they could have been prevented, and you feel for the families of all of these victims because it truly is a tragic event that shouldn't have happened once, let alone twice.
We've learned that there is a time for every matter under heaven. We laugh and we weep. We celebrate and we mourn. We serve in war and we pray for peace. But Scripture also teaches that alongside the temporal, one thing is eternal. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. Deputy Secretary Fox, General Dempsey, Secretary McHugh, Generals Odierno and Milley, and most of all, the families of the soldiers who've been taken from us, the wounded, those who've returned to duty and those still recovering, and the entire community of Fort Hood, this great place. It is love, tested by tragedy, that brings us together again. It was love for country that inspired these 3 Americans to put on the uniform and join the greatest army that the world has ever known. Sergeant First Class Daniel Ferguson, Staff Sergeant Carlos Lazani Rodriguez, Sergeant Timothy Owens. And Danny and Carlos joined 2 decades ago in a time of peace and stayed as the nation went to war. Timothy joined after 9/11, knowing he could be sent into harm's way. Between them, they deployed 9 times. Each served in Iraq. Danny came home from Afghanistan just last year. They lived those shining values: loyalty, duty, honor, that keep us strong and free. It was love for the Army that made them the soldiers they were. For Danny, said his fiancée, being in the Army was his life. Carlos, said a friend, was the epitome of what you would want a leader to be in the Army. Timothy helped counsel his fellow soldiers. Said a friend, he was always the person you could go to talk to. And it was love for their comrades, for all of you, that defined their last moments. As we've heard, when the gunman tried to push his way into that room, Danny held the door shut, saving the lives of others while sacrificing his own. And it's said that Timothy, the counselor, even then, gave his life walking toward the gunman, trying to calm him down.
Thank you all for watching this to the end. It is so strange to think somewhere as fortified and safe as a military base that all these tragic things happened. It's something you don't really think about. And I think it really shows us that it's not only sad, but also something that needs to be looked into, and there needs to be heavy reform for these situations, because the way they were handled was not only sickening, but also just inhumane. I think a lot of these could have been solved or prevented if real investigations were done and they were properly handled. And I think that's something that needs to be fixed in our system. I genuinely do, because I think a lot of these people could either still be with us or their families could have gotten closure a lot faster if it had been handled properly. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I know the formatting was a little bit different, but I hope it was pretty easy to follow. I tried to make it as easy as I could. So I hope you guys liked it, but let me know down below. And if you did like the video, go ahead and like and subscribe, because I would love to take you along on this journey with me as we grow and get better. And have a great day, because you can and because you should. I love all of you guys, and I will see you in the next one. Mwah.